The challenge. The arena was massive. Bright lights shone from above, making the smooth black stone of the floor gleam. Thousands of Amazari warriors surrounded the battlefield, their deep purple skin glowing under the lights. They stood tall, 8 feet or more, watching with sharp golden eyes. Their voices echoed in the vast stadium, their laughter rolling like thunder. In the center of the arena stood Ethan Carter. He was the only human on Salvora, the homeworld of the Amazari. He was small compared to them, only 6 feet tall, lean but strong. His brown hair was slightly messy, and a scar ran across his right cheek. His clothes were simple: black combat pants, a fitted shirt, and lightweight armor on his arms and chest. But his most powerful weapon was his mind. Across from him stood Commander Vakera. She was the best warrior of the Amazari, and she knew it. Her tall, muscular frame radiated power. Her deep purple skin shimmered under the arena lights, and her silver armor made her look even more intimidating. She smirked, arms crossed, staring down at the human with amusement. "You are too small to satisfy my species," she said, her voice full of mockery. "In battle, in strength, in any way. I do not even understand why you are here." The crowd laughed loudly, agreeing with her. They had seen no human fight before. In their eyes, Ethan was just a weak little creature from a lesser race. Ethan simply smirked. His blue eyes sparkled with something unexpected. Confidence. "Size isn't everything," he said casually. "Sometimes, the smartest fighter wins, not the biggest one." Vakera raised an eyebrow, amused. "You truly believe you can defeat me?" she asked, stepping forward. She was at least 2 feet taller than Ethan, her muscles flexing as she cracked her knuckles. "I don't believe," Ethan replied, rolling his shoulders. "I know." The crowd roared as the announcer's voice echoed through the arena. "Let the duel begin." A loud gong rang, and Vakera lunged forward. She was fast, faster than Ethan expected. Her fist shot toward his face, aiming to end the fight in one blow. But Ethan dodged. He twisted his body just in time, feeling the wind from her punch rush past his cheek. Vakera's fist slammed into the ground, cracking the stone where he had been standing. The crowd gasped. Vakera's eyes narrowed. She hadn't expected him to move like that. Ethan grinned. "Is that all?" he teased. Vakera growled. She charged again, this time using her full speed. She swung her arm, trying to grab him. Ethan ducked and slid between her legs, coming up behind her. Before she could react, he kicked the back of her knee. Vakera stumbled forward. The crowd fell silent for a moment. No one had ever seen their champion lose balance before. Vakera spun around, eyes burning with rage. She had been insulted, not just physically, but in front of her people. "You dare mock me," she hissed. Ethan just shrugged. "I told you," he said, taking a relaxed stance. "Size isn't everything." Vakera roared and attacked with full force. Her punches came fast, powerful. She was stronger than a bear, and each blow could shatter bones. But Ethan was too fast. He danced around her attacks, dodging just before each one could land. He stayed light on his feet, watching her movements closely. Vakera was using brute force, but Ethan was using strategy. He noticed a pattern. Every time she swung her right fist, her left side was wide open. So when she attacked again, Ethan dodged left. But this time, he didn't just move. He struck back. His fist slammed into her ribs, hitting a weak spot just under her armor. Vakera gasped. The crowd gasped too. No one had ever hit her like that before. Ethan stepped back, watching her carefully. Vakera's breathing was heavier now. She was angry, but also surprised. She was starting to respect him. But she would not surrender. With a snarl, she charged once more. This time, Ethan didn't dodge. Instead, he ducked under her punch and grabbed her wrist. Using her own momentum against her, he twisted his body and threw her over his shoulder. The mighty Vakera slammed into the ground. The entire arena fell silent. Vekara lay there, eyes wide in shock. No one had ever thrown her before. No human should have been able to. Ethan stood over her, offering his hand. "Do you still think I'm too small?" he asked with a smirk. For the first time, Vekara didn't have an answer. But before she could respond, alarms blared across the arena. A voice boomed over the speakers. "Warning! Incoming attack. The Ravkar fleet has entered the system." The Amazari warriors stiffened. Their faces turned from amusement to fear. Ethan frowned. "Who are the Ravkar?" he asked. Vekara slowly stood up, her golden eyes filled with something new. "A nightmare," she said, "and we are not ready." The battle had just begun. Strength and smallness. The alarms continued to wail, echoing through the massive arena. The laughter, the jeering, the spectacle of the duel, all of it disappeared in an instant. The audience of towering Amazari warriors turned their eyes toward the flashing red lights above, their expressions shifting from arrogance to unease. Ethan Carter, still catching his breath, stood in the center of the battlefield, his muscles tense. His brief victory over Commander Vekara had meant something. He had proven that humans were not weak. But now, something far more dangerous loomed. Vekara, still kneeling from the impact of their fight, pushed herself up. Dust clung to her violet skin, her golden eyes flicking from Ethan to the arena's command tower. She tapped the small comlink on her wrist. "Report," she barked. The reply came almost instantly, a voice filled with static and fear. "Commander, the Ravkar fleet has breached the outer defense grid. They are moving fast, too fast. We count 3 motherships, dozens of warships, and—" The transmission cut off abruptly. Vekara stiffened. Ethan saw the way her hands clenched into fists. The proud warrior race, who moments ago had laughed at the idea of a human being strong, now looked shaken. Ethan frowned. He had never heard of the Ravkar before, but if they could make a species like the Amazari afraid, then they had to be serious. He turned to Vekara. "You going to tell me who these guys are?" She hesitated for only a second before answering. "The Ravkar are a parasitic war species. They consume, conquer, and leave nothing behind. We have fought them before, and we barely survived." Ethan absorbed this. It wasn't just an invasion. It was extermination. Vekara straightened and faced the warriors in the arena. Her earlier humiliation was now forgotten. This was a commander stepping into her role. "All warriors report to your battle stations," she ordered. "Prepare the planetary shields and mobilize the fleet." The warriors saluted in unison before rushing out of the arena. The once thunderous battleground emptied within minutes. Ethan crossed his arms. "What's your plan?" Vekara shot him a glare. "You've proven you can fight, human, but this is a war. Your tricks will not save you against an entire fleet of Ravkar." Ethan sighed. "You still think brute force is the only way to win, don't you?" Vekara ignored him. She turned and started walking out of the arena, motioning for him to follow. Ethan did. They moved through the towering corridors of the Amazari stronghold. The walls pulsed with energy, alien symbols glowing as they passed. The entire place was built for giants, and Ethan felt like a kid walking through an oversized fortress. "You fought well," Vekara admitted, without looking at him. Ethan smirked. "Is that an apology for underestimating me?" Vekara's expression darkened. "Do not push your luck, human." They reached a war chamber, where several Amazari officers stood around a large holographic display. Ethan saw what looked like a map of the planet, with dozens of red blips moving toward it. The enemy fleet. One of the officers turned to Vekara. "Commander, the shields will not hold. Their weapons are evolving. They have adapted since our last battle. They will break through in less than an hour." Vekara clenched her jaw. "Then we take the fight to them," she declared. Ethan exhaled sharply. "That's a bad idea." Vekara turned to him, frowning. "What would you suggest, human? That we run?" That we surrender. Ethan shook his head. No. But if you charge in like last time, you're going to lose. They're expecting it. That's why they're adapting. Vekara narrowed her eyes. Ethan stepped forward, pointing at the holographic map. You said these things consume everything. That means they study their enemies before making a move. If they beat you before, it's because they knew what to expect. But you know what they haven't fought before. Vekara folded her arms. What? Ethan grinned. Me. The room fell silent. The Amazari officers stared at him as if he were insane. But Vekara, she was thinking. Ethan leaned over the hologram. You fight with power. They expect that. What if we fight with strategy? Misdirection. Precision. We lure them into thinking we're vulnerable, then strike where it hurts the most. Vekara tilted her head. And where do we strike? Ethan pointed at the center of the enemy fleet, the command vessel. The Ravkar aren't just mindless monsters, he explained. Someone's leading them. And if we take out their leader... Vekara's lips curled into a slow, dangerous smirk. Then we turn the hunters into the hunted. The Amazari warriors looked at each other, uncertain. Their entire way of war was built on strength and domination. But their last battle with the Ravkar had nearly destroyed them. Maybe, just maybe, this human was right. Ethan saw their hesitation and grinned. What's wrong? He teased. Afraid to follow someone too small to lead your species. Vekara's smirk vanished. Her eyes gleamed with challenge. You may be small, human, she said, stepping closer until she towered over him. But I am beginning to think you might be dangerous. Ethan's grin widened. Oh, sweetheart, he said. You have no idea. The real enemy. The command chamber buzzed with tension. The Amazari warriors, once so full of arrogance, now stood stiff, their golden eyes locked onto the holographic display. Red markers swarmed toward Salvora, each one representing a Ravkar warship, closing in fast. Ethan Carter stood beside Commander Vekara, arms crossed, studying the enemy's formation. He could feel the eyes of the Amazari officers burning into him. He was the only human in the room, an outsider among giants. Yet, somehow, he was leading them into battle. Vekara exhaled slowly, her sharp gaze analyzing the battlefield. The fleet is moving in a tight formation, she muttered. Their command ship is at the center, surrounded by layers of warships. Ethan nodded. That's how they protect their leader. They're smart, but not invincible. One of the Amazari generals scoffed. And what do you suggest, human? That we ask them nicely to surrender? Ethan rolled his eyes. No, but I do suggest something smarter than crashing into them head-on like a bunch of raging lunatics. The Amazari warrior growled but fell silent when Vekara raised a hand. Explain, she ordered. Ethan smirked. Finally. He walked toward the glowing battlefield display, tapping a few controls on the console. The enemy fleet expanded on the screen, giving everyone a clearer view. The Ravkar are expecting a full frontal assault, Ethan said. They know you'll attack with brute force because that's what you always do. Vekara's eyes narrowed. What do you propose? Ethan pointed at a narrow gap in the enemy formation. It wasn't much, just a small weakness in their outer defenses. This, he said, a stealth approach. We send a small, fast strike team through this weak spot, get past their outer defenses, and hit their command ship directly. The Amazari warriors exchanged glances, some uncertain, others intrigued. One of the officers stepped forward. That's a death sentence, she argued. A direct attack on their command vessel. Even if we get past their fleet, their flagship is heavily guarded. Ethan smiled. You're thinking like a warrior. I'm thinking like a survivor. He tapped the console again, shifting the battlefield display. The Ravkar are like wolves, he explained. They follow the strongest leader, but if the alpha falls, the pack scatters. Vekara's lips twitched in thought. You're saying, if we take out their leader, we don't have to fight the whole fleet. Ethan nodded. Exactly. The Ravkar don't fight for honor or pride. They fight for survival. If we cut off the head, the body crumbles. The Amazari officers whispered among themselves, weighing the plan. Vikara turned to Ethan. You're willing to lead this mission? Ethan's grin widened. Are you willing to let me? A long silence filled the room. The Amazari were a proud species. They had never followed a human before, but this was different. This was war. Vikara smirked. Very well, human, she said. You lead the strike team. But if you fail, I will personally tear your spine from your body. Ethan chuckled. Noted. Preparing for battle. The Amazari war hangar was enormous. Giant battle cruisers, sleek fighter ships, and towering mechs lined the metallic platforms. Warriors moved quickly, suiting up in heavy armor, preparing weapons. The air was thick with the scent of plasma energy and burning fuel. Ethan stood beside Vikara, examining the team that had been chosen for the mission. There were 5 Amazari warriors, each taller and more powerful than him. Their violet skin gleamed under the ship's lights, their weapons twice the size of Ethan's body. You sure this team can handle a stealth op? Ethan asked, raising an eyebrow. Vikara smirked. They are the best hunters of our people. If anyone can kill quietly, it is them. Ethan nodded. That would have to do. He checked his own gear, a lightweight exosuit built for agility over brute force. His weapons were simple, a plasma rifle, a combat knife, and a set of EMP charges. He wasn't going in for a prolonged fight. He was going in to end this quickly. Vikara approached him, her expression unreadable. You do not have to do this, she said. Ethan chuckled. I do, actually. You all still think I'm small and weak, right? Vikara's golden eyes studied him carefully. For a moment, there was no arrogance, no mockery, just something almost like respect. Not as weak as I thought, she admitted. Ethan grinned. Well, that's a start. The ship's engines roared to life. The strike team boarded the stealth shuttle, strapping into their seats. As the doors closed, Ethan took a deep breath. This was it. They were about to fly straight into the heart of the enemy fleet, into the fire. The stealth ship slipped through space, weaving between massive warships. The Ravkar fleet loomed ahead, dark, insect-like vessels, their hulls pulsing with eerie green light. Ethan could feel his heartbeat pounding. They were getting closer. Vikara's voice came through his helmet's comlink. We will launch the main assault in 10 minutes. Do not fail, human. Ethan smirked. Wouldn't dream of it. The ship entered the weak point in the fleet's defenses. So far, they were undetected. But the closer they got to the command ship, the more intense the tension became. One of the Amazari warriors growled. Something is wrong, she muttered. Ethan's stomach twisted. Then, the alarms blared. A Ravkar cruiser had spotted them. The enemy ships pivoted, red lights flashing, weapons charging. Ethan cursed. They saw us. One of the Amazari warriors yelled. Brace for evasive maneuvers, Ethan shouted. The ship veered sharply, dodging enemy fire. The entire vessel shook violently as plasma blasts grazed its hull. Ethan gritted his teeth. We're too close to turn back now. The command ship loomed ahead, its docking bay opening, a massive, gaping maw waiting to consume them. Ethan's eyes locked onto it. Hold on, he shouted. With a final, desperate push, their ship rocketed forward, slipping through the docking bay doors just as enemy fire exploded behind them. They had made it. But as the ship came to a halt inside the enemy flagship, Ethan unstrapped himself, gripping his rifle. The doors hissed open. And waiting for them inside was something worse than any of them had imagined. The smartest warrior wins. The shuttle's metallic doors hissed open with a slow, eerie groan. Inside the Ravkar command ship, the air was thick and humid, carrying a scent like rotting metal and burning flesh. The dim, green-tinted lighting flickered, casting unsettling shadows along the towering insect-like walls. Ethan Carter gripped his plasma rifle, stepping out onto the cold, pulsating floor. The structure of the ship felt alive, as if it were breathing beneath his boots. He exchanged a quick glance with the Amazari warriors at his side. They were built for battle. Tall, muscular, their violet skin gleaming in the eerie light. But even they looked unsettled. Something was wrong. This place was too quiet. They had expected resistance, guards, drones, an ambush. Instead, they were met with nothing. Ethan tapped his helmet's visor, activating the thermal scanner. The walls, the floor, even the ceiling above them. Everything was registering as biological material. This ship wasn't just a machine. It was alive. The ambush. One of the Amazari warriors, Salis, scanned the corridor ahead. "There is no one here," she muttered. "Why would the command ship be empty?" Ethan didn't like it. He had fought in enough battles to know that when things were too easy, they were about to get very, very bad. His instincts screamed danger. He raised a hand. "Move slow," he ordered. "Stay close. If something doesn't feel right, it isn't." The squad advanced carefully, their weapons raised. They moved down the narrow passageway, the walls throbbing like muscle, the floors shifting beneath them. Ethan's boots felt like they were sinking into something soft, but he forced himself to focus. That was when he heard it. A clicking sound. Faint, sharp, moving fast. He spun around just as the ceiling opened up above them. Dark, twisted shapes dropped down, claws slicing through the air. Their glowing red eyes flickered, their exoskeletons gleaming in the dim green light. The Ravkar drones had been waiting. The ambush had begun. Ethan barely had time to react before one of the creatures lunged. Its serrated claws shot toward his chest. He twisted his body, just missing the attack by inches. His rifle came up, and he fired point blank. The plasma bolt slammed into the creature's head, burning through its armor. The Amazari warriors roared, their massive blades cleaving through the Ravkar as the hallway erupted into chaos. Vekara's voice crackled through Ethan's comlink. "Human, what is happening?" Ethan fired another shot, ducked under a swinging claw, and responded through gritted teeth. "You tell me. These things were waiting for us. Fighting smart." Ethan didn't have time to think, only to survive. The Ravkar drones were fast. Their black carapaces absorbed energy blasts, their claws sharper than steel. The Amazari fought with brute force, smashing through them with their massive blades and sheer strength. But Ethan wasn't built for brute strength. He was built for adaptation. A Ravkar leaped at him, spinning midair, ready to rip out his throat. Instead of dodging backwards, which is what it expected, Ethan stepped forward, catching the creature off guard. He slammed his rifle barrel under its jaw and fired upward, blowing its head apart. The Amazari were holding their ground, but they were outnumbered. "They keep coming." Salis growled, hacking a Ravkar in half with a massive swing. Ethan scanned the area. There were too many. They couldn't fight their way through this, but they didn't have to. He activated his visor, scanning for weaknesses. His HUD displayed a faint energy source beneath the floor, a power node, hidden beneath the biological surface. Ethan grinned. "Vekara," he called through the comlink. "How much do you trust me?" There was a pause. "I trust that you are reckless," she said. "Why?" Ethan took a plasma grenade from his belt, activated it, and slammed it into the floor. "Because I'm about to do something stupid." The explosion ripped through the hallway, and the floor collapsed beneath them. Ethan and the Amazari fell into darkness. A new threat. They landed hard, rolling across what felt like solid metal. Ethan groaned, pushing himself up. His visor flickered, adjusting to the new environment. They were in a control room. Dim lights glowed from massive organic consoles, their strange, vein-like wiring pulsing with green energy. This was it, the nerve center of the command ship. "We're inside," Ethan muttered, standing. The Amazari warriors recovered quickly, their weapons still raised. Salas wiped black Ravkar blood from her blade. "You could have warned us before blowing up the floor, human," she grumbled. Ethan shrugged. "Where's the fun in that?" Before anyone could respond, a deep guttural voice echoed through the chamber. "Foolish creatures, you think you have won." Ethan froze. From the shadows, something massive stepped forward. It was not a drone. It was something else. A towering Ravkar warlord. 8 feet tall. Its black armor gleamed, its forearms twitched, and its eyes burned with a cruel intelligence. Ethan's blood ran cold. The thing smiled. "Welcome, little human. I have been waiting for you." Ethan's grip tightened on his rifle. "Oh, great," he muttered. "It talks. Winning hearts and wars." The Ravkar warlord towered over Ethan, its forearms flexing, each one ending in long, serrated claws that dripped with some kind of venom. Its carapace was thicker than the drone's, jagged with unnatural, bony protrusions. Unlike the mindless Ravkar drones, this one had intelligence behind its glowing red eyes. Ethan felt the tension in the air. This wasn't just another battle. This was the fight that would decide everything. Behind Ethan, the Amazari warriors tensed, their massive weapons raised. Even they, in all their brute strength and arrogance, knew this creature was something else. The warlord let out a low, guttural laugh. "You are different from the others," it rumbled, stepping forward. Its claws scraped against the metallic floor, sending an eerie screech through the air. Not as strong, not as fast. And yet, it tilted its head, studying Ethan like a scientist observing a new experiment. "You are dangerous." Ethan smirked, though his grip on his plasma rifle tightened. "Glad you noticed." The warlord's lips curled into a grotesque approximation of a grin. "Good. That means I will enjoy breaking you." And then it attacked. The battle begins. The warlord moved faster than Ethan expected. One moment it was standing still. The next it was blurring through the air, claws slashing downward with enough force to shatter steel. Ethan dove to the side, rolling just as the ground cracked beneath the impact. The Amazari warriors charged, their massive energy blades slicing through the air. Salas swung first, her sword aimed at the warlord's midsection. The Ravkar caught the blade mid-swing with its bare hand. Then, in one brutal motion, it ripped the sword from her grip and snapped it in half. Salas barely had time to react before the warlord's second arm smashed into her chest, sending her crashing into the wall. The Amazari weren't used to this. They were used to being the strongest. But this creature, it was stronger. "Scatter," Ethan shouted, firing his plasma rifle at the warlord's head. The first few shots glanced off its armor, barely leaving scorch marks. The warlord laughed, lunging again. Ethan knew if he tried to fight this thing head-on, he was dead. So he didn't. Instead, he ran. Fighting smart, Ethan sprinted across the control room, weaving between massive, pulsating alien consoles. The warlord chased after him, tearing through walls and ripping apart everything in its way. "You cannot run forever, human," the warlord bellowed. "I don't need to," Ethan shot back. Because he wasn't just running. He was leading it exactly where he wanted. He slid behind a towering column of organic wiring, pressing his back against it. The warlord charged, slamming into the column at full speed. And that's when Ethan detonated the EMP grenade in his hand. The explosion rippled through the chamber, sending a shockwave of energy across the warlord's body. The creature roared in pain, its 4 limbs spasming as its bioelectronic armor shut down for just a moment. And that moment was all Ethan needed. "Now," he yelled. The Amazari warriors struck as one. Salas, bruised but standing, swung her remaining blade at the warlord's exposed chest, cutting deep into its armor. Another warrior drove a spear into its side, twisting hard. Ethan took the final shot, his rifle aimed at the warlord's head. One plasma bolt, straight through the skull. The warlord staggered, Then, with a final, enraged snarl, it collapsed. Dead. The turning point. The Amazari warriors panted heavily, their weapons dripping with black Ravkar blood. For the first time, they looked at Ethan not as a weak human, but as a warrior. Vekara's voice crackled through Ethan's comlink. Human. Report. Ethan exhaled, stepping over the warlord's corpse. Target eliminated. A long pause. Then, for the first time, Vekara laughed. Perhaps you are not as useless as I thought. Ethan smirked. Told you. The battle wasn't over yet. The Ravkar still had their fleet, and they would soon realize their leader was dead. But Ethan knew what would happen next. Without their alpha, the pack would crumble. And just as predicted, within minutes, the Ravkar fleet began to scatter. The Amazari launched their counterattack, wiping out what remained. The war had turned in their favor, because of a single, small human. Aftermath. A warrior's respect. Hours later, Ethan stood on the Amazari flagship, watching the last of the Ravkar ships retreat into deep space. Vekara stood beside him. You won this war, human, she admitted. Not with brute force, but with something my kind never understood. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Which is? Vekara smirked. Cleverness. She turned to face him fully. For the first time, her golden eyes held something other than amusement or mockery. Respect. Maybe even something more. I was wrong about you, she admitted. You do satisfy my species, but not in the way I expected. Ethan laughed. Glad I could prove you wrong. The war was over. Humanity had once again defied the odds. And Ethan Carter. He had earned his place among giants. The final stand. The war was won, but the battle wasn't over yet. Ethan Carter stood aboard the Amazari flagship, looking out into the void of space. Wreckage from the destroyed Ravkar fleet drifted in all directions, glowing embers floating like dying stars. The once mighty enemy, feared across the galaxy, was scattering, leaderless, broken. But Ethan's gut told him something was wrong. Vekara, standing beside him, crossed her arms. The fleet is retreating, she said, her voice firm. Their leadership is broken. This war is over. Ethan shook his head. Not yet. Vekara raised an eyebrow. You enjoy ruining moments of victory, don't you? Ethan didn't respond. Something was nagging at him, an instinct, a gut feeling that had saved his life more times than he could count. He focused on the battlefield, scanning for anything out of place. The wreckage, the scattered enemy ships, the lack-off. His eyes narrowed. Where is their mothership? He muttered. Vekara stiffened. It wasn't anywhere in sight. The command vessel of the Ravkar fleet, the largest warship, the one that should have been guarding their leader, it was missing. That's when the alarms blared across the bridge. The holographic battlefield map flickered, and suddenly, a massive red blip appeared. Incoming warp signature. One of the Amazari officers shouted. It's. Before she could finish, space itself tore open. A hulking black ship emerged from the void, its organic surface pulsing, its massive, jagged hull stretching across the battlefield like a planet-sized predator. It was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. And it was coming straight for them. The true Ravkar mothership. A desperate gamble. The entire Amazari fleet scrambled, their ships repositioning, weapons charging. But Ethan knew the truth. They weren't ready. They had already exhausted most of their firepower against the First Fleet. Their ships were damaged. Their warriors weary. And now, the real battle was beginning. Vekara cursed under her breath. They were waiting, she muttered. They let us think we had won. Ethan clenched his jaw. They wanted us to waste everything on their first wave, he said. And now, when we're weakest, they'd bring out their true strength. The Amazari officers turned to their commander, waiting for orders. But for the first time, Vekara hesitated. Ethan saw the truth in her eyes. She didn't have a plan. The Amazari had always fought with brute force, overwhelming enemies with raw strength, but this wasn't a fight they could win that way. Ethan stepped forward. Vikara. She turned, frowning. You don't like taking orders from me, Ethan said. But right now, I need you to trust me. A long silence. Then, to his shock, she nodded. What do you need? She asked. Ethan exhaled. A decoy. The human trickery. Minutes later, the Amazari fleet moved, but not in the way the Ravkar expected. Instead of engaging head-on, half the fleet began retreating. To the enemy, it looked like a panic response, a weakened force trying to escape. The Ravkar mothership pursued, accelerating toward the retreating Amazari ships, preparing to wipe them out completely. But what they didn't see was the true attack force, a small squadron of ships, including Ethan and Vikara's strike team, hidden within the wreckage of the battlefield. The moment the mothership passed them, Ethan gave the order. Now, the hidden fleet sprang into action, bursting from the wreckage, firing everything they had at the ship's exposed rear. Massive plasma torpedoes struck the mothership's engines, sending shockwaves across its hull. The ship lurched, thrown off course. For the first time, the Ravkar were caught off guard. Ethan grinned. Never chase the bait. The final assault. The mothership's defenses activated, unleashing a storm of firepower. But it was too late. The Amazari fleet turned, now fully surrounding the crippled enemy vessel. Ethan's squadron closed in, dodging incoming fire, weaving through the battlefield. They had one shot at ending this. Target the core, Ethan ordered. Vikara's voice came through the comms. Are you sure? That explosion could take us all with it. Ethan smirked. Only if we're slow. She laughed, a sharp, dangerous sound. Then we better not be slow. The squadron rushed in, weaving through the mothership's final defenses. Ethan's ship locked onto the core, the pulsating organic power source of the Ravkar vessel. Fire everything. Amazari warships unleashed their full payloads, plasma torpedoes and particle beams converging into a single devastating strike. The core ruptured. The mothership began to collapse inward, explosions ripping through its structure. Ethan's squad veered away at full speed, barely escaping as the colossal ship detonated. The final shockwave spread across the battlefield. And then, silence. The last remnants of the Ravkar fleet disengaged, leaderless, defeated and scattered into the depths of space. It was over. This time, for real. The aftermath. A new legacy. On the bridge of the Amazari flagship, cheers erupted. Warriors who once doubted Ethan Carter now raised their fists in victory. Vikara stood beside him, watching the battlefield. She turned to Ethan. That was impressive, she admitted. You are not like any human I have encountered before. Ethan smirked. You mean I'm smarter than I look? Vikara tilted her head. Smarter, smaller, more annoying. But then her expression softened. And a warrior worthy of my people's respect. Ethan blinked. For the first time, she wasn't mocking him. She meant it. She extended her arm, the Amazari gesture of warrior respect. Ethan grasped her forearm, shaking it firmly. Guess I finally satisfy your species, huh? He teased. Vikara chuckled. Not in the way I expected. They stood there, side by side, watching the stars. The war was over, but something told Ethan. This was just the beginning. The ultimate satisfaction. The war was over, but the galaxy was still watching. Ethan Carter sat in the grand Amazari Hall of Warriors, a vast ceremonial chamber carved from the heart of a mountain-sized warship. The walls were adorned with battle banners, each one representing a great victory in Amazari history. And now, there was a new banner, freshly stitched, hanging among them. A human name was on it. Ethan sat at the center of a long, heavy stone table, surrounded by towering Amazari warriors. They were no longer laughing at him. They weren't questioning his worth. They were celebrating him. A warrior's honor. Vekara stood, raising the ceremonial drinking horn filled with black fire wine. Brothers and sisters of battle, we drink tonight to a warrior who stood against our enemies when none believed he could, she declared, her voice booming through the hall. The warriors pounded their fists on the table, a deep, thunderous sound. Vekara turned to Ethan, smirking. Ethan Carter, small and annoying as he may be, has proven that size means nothing. Strength comes in many forms, and today we acknowledge his victory as one of our own. The warriors roared in approval, their cheers shaking the very walls of the chamber. Ethan leaned back, grinning. Finally, he said, lifting his own drink. Some recognition. Vekara chuckled. Do not get too comfortable, human, she warned. The Amazari do not honor weaklings, but once you are one of us, you must always prove yourself worthy. Ethan smirked. Oh, so now I'm one of you. Vekara's golden eyes gleamed. Yes, she said simply, and that meant something. The Amazari were not just warriors. They were a people of pride and tradition, and earning their respect was nearly impossible. Ethan hadn't just survived their trials. He had become one of them. The Queen's offer. As the celebration raged on, a deep gong rang through the hall. The warriors fell silent. The massive doors of the chamber opened, and she entered. Queen Solara, ruler of the Amazari. Her presence commanded the room. She was taller than any warrior, her violet skin shining under the flickering torchlight. Her golden crown rested atop flowing silver hair, her armor a masterpiece of war-forged steel. Everyone stood as she approached. Ethan followed suit, placing his drink down carefully. He had never actually met the Amazari queen, but if she was anything like Vekara, she wasn't here for small talk. Solara's piercing gaze fell upon Ethan. The humans are an unpredictable species, she said, her voice smooth but powerful. Most of us believed you would die in the first battle. And yet, here you stand. Ethan smirked. I have a habit of disappointing people who want me dead. A few warriors laughed, but Solara remained unreadable. You have earned your place among us, she said. But I did not come here to congratulate you. I came here to offer you something greater. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Greater? Vekara folded her arms, clearly already aware of what was coming. The queen stepped forward. Our people have never had an outsider among our ranks, she said. We have fought alone for centuries, believing that we needed no allies. But today, you have proven that belief wrong. Ethan nodded. Glad I could help. But what does that mean? The queen smirked. It means I am offering you a place as one of our warlords. The hall fell into stunned silence. Even Vekara's eyes widened. Ethan blinked. Wait. What? Solara continued. The Amazari have many commanders, but few warlords. They are our greatest warriors, our highest leaders. If you accept, you will not be a mere ally. You will be one of us in name, title, and duty. Ethan stared. This was bigger than anything he expected. Vekara stepped closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. It is a great honor, she said. A title that few warriors ever achieve, and you would be the first non-Amazari in history to hold it. Ethan exhaled slowly. This wasn't just about winning a war anymore. This was about changing history. And yet, his mind raced. What would it mean? Was he ready for this? The answer came almost immediately. He had never been ready for anything in his life. But he had survived anyway. Ethan looked up at the queen. If I say yes, what happens next? Solara's smirk deepened. Then your true trials begin. Ethan grinned. Well, in that case, I guess I better say yes. The hall erupted in cheers, warriors pounding their fists, chanting his name. But amid the celebration, Vekara leaned closer. You do realize this means I will be your superior officer, yes, she whispered. Ethan laughed. Oh, I'm sure you'll remind me every day. A new beginning. The war was over. The galaxy had changed. And Ethan Carter, he wasn't just some human outsider anymore. He was a warlord of the Amazari, the first of his kind. And this was just the beginning. Because if there was one thing Ethan knew, there would always be another fight. And now, he had an entire warrior race at his side. Humanity had never looked stronger.